Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. We see color literally everywhere, from the clothes we wear to the screens in our hands, but how much do we really understand about it? Today, we're taking a plunge into that hidden complexity. It's a world where physics, chemistry, biology, art, and even culture all collide.
It truly is. Think about a vibrant sunset or, the subtle tones on your smartphone color is just fundamental to our experience. But what's fascinating is how little most of us know about the intricate processes behind that perception.
That's exactly what we're going to uncover. Our mission in this deep dive is to pull back the curtain and explore the surprising insights behind color, from its ancient origins in art to the cutting edge science that shapes our digital world and how it impacts our very emotions and perceptions. We've got a massive stack of sources for this, so let's unpack this. To really get to the heart of it, let's start with a foundational idea. What is color, fundamentally? Our sources make it pretty clear it's not something inherent in the object itself, but rather a visual perception.
That's right. It's all about how light interacts with matter, how it's absorbed, emitted, reflected, or transmitted.
Okay.
So when light hits something, say a bright yellow banana, the banana absorbs most wavelengths, but it reflects the yellow ones. And when that reflected yellow light enters our eyes, that's when the magic happens, really. The human eye is equipped with three types of cone cells, S, M, and L cones, each primarily sensitive to different wavelengths: short blue, medium green, and long, which is actually more greenish yellow.
Right, S, M, and L. And it's genuinely mind-blowing to think that with just these three types of cones, our eyes and brains work together to distinguish something like 10 million different colors.
It really is.
It makes you realize how much of our reality is actively constructed by our own visual system.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating here is how our understanding of this process has evolved.
Yeah.
We actually got a big leap forward way back in 1666. Sir Isaac Newton conducted his famous prism experiment then.
Ah, the prism. Classic.
Yeah. He showed that white light, like sunlight, isn't pure. It's actually composed of a continuous spectrum of colors.
Mm.
He even gave them their familiar names: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, ROYGBIV.
Right. And he also emphasized that these spectral colors are pure or monochromatic, meaning they're made of just a single wavelength. But of course, color is far more nuanced than just those 7 spectral hues. Our sources break it down into 4 main qualities that help us describe any color.
Indeed. First, we have hue. That's the pure color itself, its position around the color wheel, like a true red or a pure blue. Basically what we usually mean when we just say color.
Got it. Hue is the basic color.
Then there's saturation, also known as chroma or intensity. This tells us how vibrant or dull a color is. Think of a brilliant, rich blue versus a muted, sort of grayed out version of that same blue.
Okay, so vividness. And then there's value.
Exactly. Value describes how light or dark a color is. This one really connects to our everyday language, doesn't it?
Yeah, like light blue versus dark blue.
Right. We talk about creating a tint by adding white to lighten a color, or a shade by adding black to darken it, or even a tone by adding gray, is maybe why we might feel lighthearted or be in a dark temper. Those words aren't accidental.
Huh, interesting connection. And the last one.
Lastly, we have temperature. Colors are broadly categorized as warm, like yellows, oranges, and reds, which often feel energetic.
Like fire or sunshine.
Exactly. Or cool, like blues, greens, and purples, which can feel calming or receding. But it's not always a hard line. Individual hues can shift temperature too. A red with a hint of yellow feels warmer, while a red leaning towards blue feels cooler.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. The mind-bending side of color perception. Like, for example, have you ever bought a white shirt that looked perfectly white in the store?
Oh yeah,
But then you get it home, and under your living room lights, it looks slightly off-white, maybe a bit yellow.
that happens all the time. That's often due to metamers.
Metamers.
Yeah. It means that different light spectra can actually appear as the exact same color to the human eye. So the fluorescent lights in the store might emit light in a few narrow bands, while your home's incandescent bulbs have a continuous spectrum. Yet your brain processes both as white. Until, maybe, you see them side by side and the subtle differences become apparent.
Wow. So our perception is really filling in the gaps.
It's an active construction, absolutely.
And speaking of brain construction, I read that some colors we see don't even exist as single wavelengths in the visible spectrum, like pink.
That's right. Colors like pink, magenta, brown, and many purples are actually what our brains create by combining different signals. They're extraspectral.
Extraspectral. I like that.
Magenta is a prime example. If you look at a rainbow or the spectrum from a prism, you won't find magenta.
Huh. You're right.
It's formed by our brains to sort of fill the gap between red and violet on the color wheel. It's proof that color perception isn't just about the light hitting our eyes, but the incredible way our visual system and brain interpret and synthesize that information.
So, if our brain is actively constructing some colors, what does that imply about our individual experience of them? And why, for example, can't I ever seem to imagine a reddish green? It just feels impossible.
That's a great question, and it takes us into the deeper science of how our brain processes color after the cones. While our cones handle the initial light reception, that's the trichromatic theory, further along the visual pathway, especially in the brain, color information is processed through opponent channels.
Opponent channels.
Yeah, red, green, blue, yellow, and black, white. This opponent process theory, proposed by Herring, explains why you can't see a reddish green or a bluish yellow. Those signals literally cancel each other out in the brain. A neuron can signal red or green, but not both at the same time.
Ah, okay. That makes so much sense.
It's also why, after staring at a strong red object, you often see a green after image when you look away.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
That happens because those red-sensitive opponent cells become temporarily fatigued or desensitized, so you perceive the opposite green.
That is fascinating. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this brain processing also helps us understand the amazing variations in color perception among people, like color vision deficiency, or what's commonly called color blindness.
Exactly. It isn't usually about not seeing color at all, but perceiving a smaller range or gamut of colors. It's typically due to missing or shifted cone cells. Red-green color blindness, for example, affects about 8% of males. They have trouble distinguishing between reds and greens.
Okay. And then there's the other end of the spectrum, right? Tetrachromacy.
Then there's the incredibly rare phenomenon of tetrachromacy.
Rare.
While most of us have 3 types of cones, trichromats, some individuals, predominantly women, actually have the genetic potential for 4.
4 types. Wow.
Yeah. And for the very, very few who are functional tetrachromats, meaning that 4th cone type actually works distinctively, it could mean perceiving up to 100 million colors.
100 million.
Compared to the average person's, say, 1 million, maybe up to 10 million on a good day. Imagine seeing the world with that kind of richness.
I literally can't. And sometimes perception crosses senses entirely, like in synesthesia.
Right, where individuals might literally experience colors when they see letters or numbers. That's grapheme color synesthesia. Or hear sounds and see colors, chromesthesia.
Pythagoras is mentioned as an early documented case.
Yeah, there's speculation about him. He created mathematical equations for musical notes, forming a scale, and some think he might have perceived their inherent colors or qualities. It's hard to know for sure, but it fits the idea.
And one more perception thing, color constancy. How does that work?
Color constancy is crucial. Our brain works tirelessly, automatically, to keep colors looking consistent, even under different lighting conditions. Think of a white sheet of paper. It still looks white whether you're under bright sunlight, which is quite bluish, or under a dim yellow lamp, even though the actual wavelengths hitting your eye are totally different. Our brain adjusts for the lighting.
It just knows it's white.
Pretty much. Artists can actually play with this. For instance, using a very limited palette in a painting can make a neutral gray appear subtly bluish, because the brain kind of expects more blue and compensates for its absence elsewhere.
That's brilliant. Okay, now that we've journeyed through the science of how we see color, let's take a whirlwind tour through its rich history, from prehistoric pigments to synthetic wonders. The story of art, in many ways, is the story of humanity's evolving understanding and mastery of color.
Indeed. The very first artists, going back maybe 40,000 years, weren't mixing complex chemicals, obviously. They were using basic materials found around them.
Yeah.
Soil, animal fat, charcoal from burnt wood, and chalk.
Which gave them what? A few basic colors?
Yeah, a fundamental palette of about 5 colors. Red, yellow, brown, black, and white. Earth tones, mostly.
And one of those, red, specifically red ochre, which is basically iron oxide, rust.
Exactly. It's among the oldest pigments still in use today, seen in those amazing prehistoric cave paintings across the globe.
But then the story of red takes a really wild turn with cochineal, right?
Oh, cochineal, yes. This tiny insect, found on prickly pear cacti in Mexico, became an absolute sensation in Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries. It produces this fantastically potent, beautiful red dye.
So potent that. Wasn't it like a huge import?
It was so coveted, it actually became the 3rd greatest import from the New World after gold and silver. Can you believe it? A bug.
That's incredible.
European masters like Raphael, Rembrandt, and Rubens used it for their vivid reds. It gave a richness they couldn't get otherwise. And here's a fun fact. It's surprisingly still used today in some lipsticks and food colorings because it's so vibrant and, importantly, non-toxic.
From bugs to beauty products. Okay, from the fiery reds, let's turn to blue, which for centuries was literally more precious than gold.
You're talking about ultramarine blue, which came from lapis lazuli,
Right, the gemstone.
a beautiful deep blue gemstone found primarily in just one remote mountain range in Afghanistan. Its rarity and the extremely complex, difficult process needed to extract the pure blue pigment meant its cost rivaled gold, ounce for ounce.
So when you see it in old paintings,
Painters would often reserve it for the most important figures, like the Virgin Mary's robe. But our sources suggest it wasn't always about religious symbolism.
oh,
It was often just about signifying the immense prestige and wealth of the patron who could actually afford such a lavish pigment for the painting. Showing off, basically.
makes sense. You see it everywhere from ancient Egyptian funerary portraits to exquisite Iranian Korans, and famously in Vermeer's Girl with a Pearl Earring, that blue headband.
Exactly. Fast forward to the 1950s, and the artist Yves Klein actually invented his own synthetic version of ultramarine international Klein blue, or IKB. It became his signature hue. He was obsessed. He famously said, "Blue has no dimensions. It is beyond dimensions."
Wow, he really felt it. Okay, moving on to yellow. Few artists are as known for yellow as, say, Turner and Van Gogh.
That's true. Turner in particular was notorious for his use of incredibly bright, almost luminous yellows.
And some of them had weird origins, right?
He used Indian yellow, which is, well, a rather controversial pigment. It was derived from the urine of cows that were fed only mango leaves.
Mango-fed cow's urine? Seriously?
Seriously, it produced this unique, rich yellow. The practice was later banned for cruelty to the animals, thankfully.
Yeah, good.
And for even brighter touches, Turner used chrome yellow, which was a lead-based pigment, also quite toxic, known to cause delirium. Lead poisoning is nasty stuff.
And Van Gogh, of course, famously used yellows in his sunflowers. You can almost feel the heat.
Absolutely. Paul Gauguin wrote about how Vincent loved yellow, this gleam of sunlight warming his soul. The sad irony, of course, is that these vibrant lead-based yellows might have contributed to their health problems, maybe even Van Gogh's mental state.
That's dark.
Right.
And that leads us perfectly to green, which, despite its association with nature and life, has a surprisingly dark, even deadly history.
Yeah, this one's genuinely unsettling. Many popular green pigments throughout history were downright poisonous.
Like Scheele's green.
Scheele's green, invented in 1775, was laced with arsenic, but it produced a beautiful, vibrant green, so it became incredibly popular. It was used in everything: clothing, toys, confectionery coloring, and wallpapers.
Wallpaper. With arsenic.
Yes. In fact, it's rumored to have been used in Napoleon Bonaparte's bedroom on St. Helena. Some historians speculate that the damp climate released arsenic fumes, contributing to his illness and death.
Wow, that's a heck of a theory. Killed by his wallpaper.
It's a grim irony, isn't it? Humanity's relentless pursuit of beauty through color, leading artists and consumers to unwittingly poison themselves for vibrant hues. By the late 19th century, another arsenic and copper mixture, Paris green, replaced Scheele's green. Even more vibrant, potentially even more toxic.
And artists use this too.
Oh, yes. Impressionists like Monet and Cézanne loved it for their vivid landscapes, but it was highly toxic. It's theorized to have possibly contributed to Cézanne's diabetes and maybe Monet's later blindness. We can't know for sure, but the risk was real.
It certainly highlights the hidden cost of creativity and this paradox of beauty and danger coexisting. So, after all that danger, what about purple? Monet famously declared, "Fresh air is violet." The Impressionists seemed to love purple.
They really did. And their particular love affair with purple, especially violet shades, owes a lot to a simple invention by an American portrait painter named John Gough Rand.
An invention? What did he invent?
In 1841, Rand invented the collapsible tin paint tube.
Ah, the paint tube. That seems so basic now.
It seems basic, but it completely revolutionized painting, especially plein air or outdoor painting. Before tubes, artists had to carry pigment powders and mix them with oil, or use these messy, fragile pig's bladders to store pre-mixed paint.
Ugh. Pig's bladders. Okay, tubes sound much better.
Exactly. Tubes meant artists could easily carry stable, pre-mixed paints anywhere. It also led to the mass production of affordable new synthetic shades. One of the first big ones was manganese violet, the first really affordable, stable mauve-colored paint. This helped spark what some art historians call violetomania among the Impressionists, especially Monet. They started seeing violet everywhere.
Because they finally could paint with it easily. Let's talk about the foundational shades, black and white. How did they fit in?
Well, for the old masters, bone black, which was made by burning animal bones in an oxygen-free chamber, was considered the deepest, richest black pigment.
Long black, okay.
The Impressionists, though, often famously avoided using pure black. They believed shadows weren't just black, but full of reflected light and subtle color.
Right, they'd mix deep blues and purples instead.
Exactly. But then, fast forward to the 1950s and 60s, and American artists like Frank Stella and Ad Reinhardt went the other way entirely. They embraced monochromatic black paintings, making black the star. They explored its nuances. As the Japanese artist Hokusai once said, "There's a black which is old and a black which is fresh. Lustrous black and dull black. Black in sunlight and black in shadow. It's not just one thing."
Highlighting its subtle nuances. And as for white, lead white seems to be the big story there.
Yeah, our sources note that of all the pigments banned for toxicity, lead white is perhaps the one most missed by painters today.
Why? What was so special about it?
It had this unique gleam, a kind of opacity and texture, almost a luminous quality that modern whites like titanium or zinc white can't quite replicate. It handled beautifully with oil paint.
But it was lead. So dangerous.
Extremely. And its production method was, well, pretty grotesque. It involved layering strips of lead over vinegar, then covering the whole thing with decomposing animal manure in a sealed room for months.
More? Seriously?
The heat and gases from the manure helped corrode the lead into lead carbonate, the white pigment. It worked, but
It
like...
makes...
And despite scientists identifying lead as poisonous way back in the late 19th century, lead white paint wasn't banned for residential use in the U.S. until 1978.
1978, that's shockingly recent.
It is. Modern artists now turn to titanium and zinc whites. They're much safer, brighter in some ways, but they just don't have that same handling quality or subtle gleam of the old lead white.
So a lost character, in a way. Okay, now that we've delved into how color is perceived and its incredible history, let's explore color in action. How it's mixed and used in art, design, and the world around us. First, the two main mixing methods seem crucial.
Absolutely. First, there's additive color. This is all about mixing light itself. The primary colors here are red, green, and blue, RGB. When you combine beams of these three colored lights in equal amounts, you get white light.
Right, like on our screens.
Exactly. This is what you see in your smartphone screens, computer monitors, televisions, stage lighting, projectors. Anywhere, light is being directly emitted.
Okay, additive is light, RGB makes white.
Then there's subtractive color. This is about mixing pigments like paints or inks or dyes, things that absorb some light and reflect others. The primary colors for this system are cyan, magenta, and yellow CMY.
CMY, okay, like printer ink cartridges.
Precisely. When you mix these three pigments, they subtract more and more light, and ideally you end up with black. In printing, they usually add a separate black ink, K, for a true deep black, hence CMYK. Our sources highlight a common confusion here. People often mistakenly learn red, yellow, and blue as the primary colors for paint.
Yeah, I think I learned that in school.
Many people did. While those are important historical primaries, for true subtractive mixing that gives the widest range of colors, cyan, magenta, and yellow are the scientifically accurate primaries. It's a subtle but important distinction.
Good to know. CMY for pigment, RGB for light.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is how these mixing methods form the basis for color harmony. These are essentially established formulas or guidelines for creating aesthetically pleasing color combinations. Designers and artists use them all the time.
Okay, like rules for making colors look good together. What are some key ones?
Well, there's monochromatic. This uses different shades, tones, or tints of just a single hue. So various blues from light to dark. It creates a very cohesive, often subtle and sophisticated look.
Simple, elegant. Okay.
Then there's complementary. This uses two colors directly opposite each other on the color wheel, like red and green, or blue and orange, or yellow and violet.
Ah, opposites attract.
Sort of. They create really strong contrast, high visual energy, perfect for grabbing attention. Think of many sports team logos using complementary colors.
Makes sense. What else?
Then you have analogous schemes. These use 2 to 4 colors that sit right next to each other on the color wheel, like yellow, yellow-green, and green. They blend smoothly, feel harmonious, and often create a simple, appealing effect, kind of reflecting palettes you see in nature.
Nice, like a forest scene.
Exactly. And for bolder statements, there's triadic, which uses 3 colors evenly spaced around the wheel, like red, yellow, and blue. Very balanced but vibrant. and tetraedic, which uses 4 colors forming a rectangle on the wheel, essentially 2 pairs of complementary colors. Can be complex, but very rich if done well.
So lots of options for combining colors effectively. This all leads to how artists use color for incredibly expressive purposes, right? Going way beyond just copying reality.
Absolutely. Artists use color deliberately to set moods, create focus, highlight importance, evoke feelings.
Like you mentioned Renoir using warm colors in his mother and child to create a cheerful, inviting scene.
Right. And then, if we connect this to the bigger picture, David Alfaro Siqueiros painted a very similar subject in his Peasant Mother, but he used a palette dominated by cool blues and grays.
And the feeling is completely different.
Totally different. Much sadder, colder, maybe conveying hardship. Neither artist was aiming for photorealism in color. They were both using colors subjectively to powerfully evoke specific feelings in the viewer.
And it's not just the hue, the color itself. You mentioned value, the lightness and darkness affects mood too.
Dramatically, tints or lighter colors made by adding white tend to feel more cheerful, airy, lighthearted. Shades, darker colors made by adding black, tend to feel gloomier, heavier, more serious. Think of a dark temper.
And saturation, the intensity.
Saturation creates impact too. Think of Matisse's incredibly vibrant red room. The intense red just dominates and energizes the whole space. Compare that to, say, Zhu Chen's classical Chinese painting Peach Blossom Spring. It uses mostly muted, low-saturation colors, which creates a calm, serene feeling. But then, a single saturated detail, like a small splash of bright red on a figure's robe, really stands out and draws your eye immediately because of the contrast and saturation.
Okay, so contrast isn't just about complementary colors, it's also about value and saturation. How does contrast, specifically light versus dark, fit in?
Contrast, in terms of value, the variation between light and dark is fundamental. It shapes how we perceive form and depth. Hiroshi Sugimoto's photograph Cliffs of Moher, for example, uses very low contrast. Everything is in similar mid-grays. It conveys a soft, misty, almost ethereal feeling. Form seems to dissolve.
Right, it's very gentle.
Then look at Robert Mapplethorpe's iconic photograph Calla Lily. It uses extremely high contrast, brilliant white petals against a deep black background.
Very sharp, dramatic.
Exactly. It gives a sharp, crisp, very graphic and dramatic effect. The edges are clearly defined.
And you can push contrast to the absolute limit, like Kara Walker does with her silhouettes.
Precisely. Her work uses absolute black and white contrast. These dark silhouettes aren't just visually striking, they force you to confront difficult themes like American history, race, and violence, often hidden in plain sight.
So the visual elements, like contrast, have implications far beyond just the purely visual. They carry meaning.
Definitely. What's fascinating here, too, is that not all color actually comes from pigments or dyes absorbing light. Sometimes, color arises from structure.
Structure, how does that work?
It's called structural color. The color we see is produced by the physical structure of an object at a microscopic, often nanoscale level. These structures interfere with light waves, scattering or reflecting specific wavelengths.
Okay, give me an example.
Think of a peacock's iridescent feathers. There's no blue or green pigment in there, really. It's the complex, layered structure of the feather barbules that interferes with light to create those shimmering colors.
Wow, so it's physics, not chemistry.
Mostly physics, yeah. Same with the shimmering colors on soap bubbles, the iridescent sheen on some beetles or butterfly wings, or even the blue color of the sky.
The sky. How is the sky structural color?
The blue color of the sky is caused by Rayleigh scattering. Tiny molecules in the Earth's atmosphere, nitrogen and oxygen, scatter shorter wavelengths of sunlight, blue and violet, much more effectively than longer wavelengths, red and orange. So we see blue light scattered across the sky.
Mind blown. Okay.
And theoretically, pushing color brightness to the limit, physicists talk about optimal colors. These are the most chromatic, the absolute purest, most vibrant colors that surfaces could possibly have under given lighting.
Like a theoretical maximum saturation?
Pretty much. It's a theoretical limit based on physics,
Right.
a kind of color perfection that we actually can't quite achieve yet with our current real-world pigments or dyes. Something for material scientists to aim for.
Always pushing the boundaries. Okay, moving into the modern era, the quest for realistic color reproduction has driven incredible innovation, especially in the digital frontier.
Oh, absolutely.
Early color photography was pretty primitive, right? Sometimes just hand painting black and white photos.
Yeah, hand tinting was common. But then James Clerk Maxwell, the famous physicist, pioneered a groundbreaking method back in the mid-19th century. He took 3 separate black and white photographs of the same scene, each through a different colored filter, red, green, and blue.
The RGB primaries again?
Exactly. Then He projected those three images superimposed onto a screen, each through its corresponding colored filter. And voila, a color image appeared. It was the first demonstration of additive color photography.
That's ingenious for the time.
It really was. And this laid the groundwork for the fundamental need for color spaces, standardized mathematical models designed to define and accurately reproduce color across different devices, like cameras, scanners, monitors, and printers.
We need a common language for color.
Precisely. The foundational one, developed in 1931 by the International Commission on Illumination, CIE, is the CIE 1931 XYZ chromaticity diagram. You've probably seen it. It looks like a sort of curved triangle or bubble shape.
Yeah, the horseshoe shape.
Right. It maps all the colors visible to the average human eye based on those XYZ coordinates, which relate back to our cone responses.
But it wasn't perfect, was it, in terms of how we perceive color differences?
No, that was the issue. A certain distance change in one part of the diagram didn't look like the same amount of color difference as the same distance change in another part. It wasn't perceptually uniform.
Okay, so we needed better models.
Exactly. That's why we moved to more sophisticated, perceptually uniform spaces, like C-Braille and, more commonly now, C-Lab, often written 11. These were designed so that a small step in the mathematical model feels like a correspondingly small step in color difference to our eyes. It makes color management much more predictable.
And C-Lab is based on that opponent process theory.
Yes. The L represents lightness. The A-axis represents the red-green opponent channel, and the B-axis represents the blue-yellow opponent channel. It directly models how our brain processes color differences, which is why it works so well for things like calculation color difference formulas or even predicting afterimages.
Clever. And there are even newer ones.
Yeah, things keep evolving. We have related spaces like LCH, lightness, chroma, hue, which can be more intuitive to work with than AB. And even newer models like OKLab and OKLCH are gaining traction because they promise even better perceptual uniformity, especially for things like creating smooth, natural-looking color gradients on screens.
Always improving accuracy. So how do modern cameras actually capture this color information?
Well, modern digital cameras use sensors covered with millions of tiny pixels, and most use a color filter array, typically a Bayer filter. This filter puts a red, green, or blue filter over each individual pixel, but often with twice as many green filters as red or blue.
Why more green?
Because our eyes are most sensitive to green light, so capturing more green information helps create an image that looks sharper and more detailed to us. The camera's processor then cleverly interpolates the missing color information for each pixel, a process called demosaicing.
Wow, okay. And then they have to deal with the lighting, right? White balance.
Crucial step. White balance is the camera essentially adjusting the image data to account for the color temperature of the light source illuminating the scene. Daylight is fairly neutral or slightly blue. Indoor tungsten light is very yellow-orange. Fluorescent light can be greenish. White balance corrects for these casts so that objects that should look white actually do look white in the final image.
How does it know what's white?
Often it assumes the brightest parts of the image should be neutral. Or you can tell it specifically by shooting a white card, or it uses presets based on typical lighting conditions. It often references a standard like D65, which represents average midday daylight around 6,500 Kelvin. It's like giving the camera a universal reference point for true white.
Got it. And there's also gamma correction? What's that?
Gamma correction is about brightness perception. Our eyes don't perceive brightness linearly. We're much more sensitive to changes in dark tones than bright tones. Displays, however, tend to reproduce brightness linearly. Gamma correction applies a curve to the image data to compensate for this difference, making the perceived brightness levels look natural and ensuring details in shadows and highlights are preserved correctly when displayed. Without it, images might look too dark or washed out.
So many adjustments happening behind the scenes. And speaking of displays, how do they actually generate the color we see?
Displays generate color using those tiny picture elements, or pixels. Each pixel is usually made up of even tinier subpixels, typically one red, one green, and one blue, RGB. By varying the intensity of each subpixel, the display can mix different amounts of red, green, and blue light to create millions of different colors within that single pixel square.
And the number of colors depends on color depth.
Exactly. Color depth is measured in bits per color channel, red, green, and blue. Standard is often 8 bits per channel, which gives you 256 levels for red, 256 for green, 256 for blue.
So 256 by 256 by 256.
Which comes out to about 16.7 million possible colors. That's true color or 24-bit color, 8 bits by 3 channels.
Which sounds like a lie.
It is. But higher-end displays used for professional work or HDR content might use 10 bits per channel, 30-bit color, or even 12 bits per channel, 36-bit color.
Please.
10 bits gives you over a billion colors. 12 bits gives you over 68 billion. This allows for much smoother gradients, finer nuances, and avoids that visible banding you sometimes see in skies or subtle fades on 8-bit displays.
A billion colors, hard to even imagine. And the display technologies themselves have changed hugely.
Oh, massively. We started with bulky CRTs, cathode ray tubes. They actually had great color accuracy and fast response times, but they were big, heavy, and power hungry.
Then came LCDs, liquid crystal displays, much thinner and lighter.
Yes, but early LCDs often had issues with washed-out blacks, limited viewing angles, and slower response times compared to CRTs. Backlighting technology improved things, moving to LEDs, light-emitting diodes, as the backlight source instead of fluorescent tubes, CCFLs. LED backlit LCDs are better, but still rely on filtering light.
And now the big thing is OLED.
OLED, organic light-emitting diode, is a major leap. In an OLED display, each individual pixel generates its own light. This means they can be turned completely off to produce true, perfect black.
Ah, no backlight bleeding through.
Exactly. This gives them incredibly high contrast ratios, amazing color accuracy, wide viewing angles, and very fast response times. They're generally considered the top tier for image quality right now.
And then there's QLED, is that the same?
Not quite. QLED, quantum dot LED, is mostly used by Samsung. It's still fundamentally an LCD panel with an LED backlight, but it adds a layer of quantum dots, tiny semiconductor particles that emit very pure colors when hit by light. This improves the color gamut and brightness compared to standard LED LCDs. And now there's even QD OLED, which combines OLED panels with quantum dots to try and get the best of both worlds, the perfect blacks of OLED with the enhanced color volume and brightness from quantum dots.
The tech just keeps advancing. This all ties into color gamuts, right? The range of colors a device can show.
Precisely. A color gamut defines the specific range or subset of colors from the entire visible spectrum that a particular system, like a camera, monitor, or printer, can actually capture, display, or reproduce. Think of it like the specific palette of colors available to that device.
And there are different standard gamuts.
Yes, several common ones. Rec. 709 is the standard for HD TV broadcasting. sRGB is very similar to Rec. 709 and is the standard gamut for the web and most consumer content. It's a relatively limited gamut. Adobe RGB is a wider gamut, often used in photography and printing, capturing more saturated greens and cyans than sRGB. DCI-P3 is wider still, commonly used in digital cinema projection. It's the target for Hollywood movies, and many modern devices like Apple products aim for P3 coverage.
P3 is becoming more common.
It is. And then there's Rec. 2020, which is the standard for Ultra HD, 4K, and 8K television. It's a very wide gamut, covering a much larger portion of the visible spectrum than P3 or sRGB, allowing for much richer and more realistic colors, though most current displays can't actually show the full Rec. 2020 gamut yet.
Something to aim for. And the other big buzzword is HDR. How does that relate?
HDR, or high dynamic range, is a huge breakthrough for displays. It's not just about wider color gamuts, but also about a much greater range of brightness and darkness.
More contrast.
Way more contrast, yes, but also much brighter highlights and deeper, more detailed shadows within the same image. Standard dynamic range SDR displays typically max out at around 100 nits of brightness. HDR displays can go much, much higher, often 1,000 nits, sometimes even peaking at several thousand nits.
Nits being a measure of brightness.
Right, luminance. This vastly increased dynamic range allows HDR content to show incredibly bright, specular highlights, like reflections off metal or the sun, alongside deep blacks, while maintaining detail across the whole range. It makes images look dramatically more lifelike, punchy, and immersive, almost jumping off the screen. It requires both HDR content and an HDR-capable display.
It really does make a difference when you see it. Okay, finally, let's touch on the psychology of color in marketing and design. This is where color gets really persuasive, right?
It definitely is. It's not just about aesthetics. Colors evoke strong emotions, associations, and can influence behavior. Designers and marketers use this constantly.
Like the classic example of fast food logos often using red and yellow.
Exactly. Red is often associated with energy, excitement, and can even stimulate appetite. Yellow is associated with happiness, optimism, and grabs attention. Combining them aims to create a feeling of quick, cheerful energy perfect for fast food.
But this isn't universal, is it? You can't just say blue means calm everywhere.
Absolutely not. That's a crucial point. Color psychology is heavily dependent on context, personal experience, and especially culture.
How so?
Well, for example, white symbolizes purity, innocence, and weddings in many Western cultures. But in many East Asian cultures, White is the color associated with death and mourning. Completely different meanings.
Wow, yeah, that's a big difference.
Or think about red. In the West, it can mean love, passion, but also danger or stopping. In China, red is overwhelmingly positive, symbolizing luck, joy, prosperity, and celebration. It's used for holidays and weddings.
So designers really need to be aware of their target audience.
Definitely. This raises an important question for designers. How do you pick the right colors? It's about more than just, I like blue.
Yeah.
Some key principles our sources mention include picking one dominant color for branding or mood, using just a few colors, maybe 2, 3 main ones plus neutrals, for clarity and avoiding chaos.
Tip it simple.
Right. Ensuring the palette fits the specific context and purpose. Luxury brands often use black, gold, silver. Eco-friendly products use greens and browns. And of course, always ensuring sufficient contrast between text and background so elements are easy to read and accessible. Don't make things look muddy or hard to see.
Accessibility is key.
Absolutely. And thankfully, there are tons of digital tools and websites now that can help generate compelling and harmonious color palettes based on these principles.
Wow. We've really delved into the hidden depths of color today, haven't we? From the earliest artists rubbing red ochre on cave walls to the invisible wavelengths our eyes perceive, the brain's incredible processing feats.
The surprising, sometimes toxic history of pigments like green and yellow.
The rise of synthetic dyes, the physics of structural color, and the mind-bending accuracy of modern digital displays and color spaces.
It's truly a journey that takes us from ancient Earth to digital screens, from pure science to profound art, and from basic perception right through to complex human emotion and cultural meaning.
So here's a final thought. The next time you choose an outfit, admire a painting, design a presentation, or even just look at something simple like a banana, what secret stories of physics, history, biology, and culture will you uncover in the colors of your own world?
Keep noticing, keep questioning. There's always more to see and more to learn in the incredibly colorful world all around you.